So we're both smiling. I love when we have conversations like
Always,
this where, the
100%.
person has an interesting personal story. Most people don't go from investment banking to urinary incontinence, at least not on purpose. And speaking today to Lauren Barker from Uresta, she is so focused and so excited and really so connected to the problems that she's solving. It really just makes me smile. Most people don't want to talk about incontinence and smile, but both of us the whole time were like, "Oh my God, tell me more, tell me more."
Yeah, the incontinence industry is massive. And, the days of just having pads or underwear that may be absorbent or staying home to avoid the embarrassment and shame of leakage are over. This device that we're going to speak about called Uresta today is super novel, invented by a urogynecologist, and really making a splash in Canada and making its way into the US market for sure.
And I also feel like for physicians like you, there are so many things that you're so busy in that the time that you have with your patients. How great is it to give them options that they can manage some of these conditions that are not life-threatening, outside the office, and they still feel like they get a good solution.
Yeah. And you bring up such a good point, not life threatening. However, they really intrude into somebody's quality
Really
of life.
intrusive.
And if someone can have the wherewithal to take matters into their own hands and try something from over the counter, it's just super valuable. So let's take a listen and
Yeah.
speak with Lauren.
And I do want to mention, Lauren had one expression that she used over and over again, and it seems so true. She kept saying right place, right time. She said that when how she met her co-founder. She said that with, she just did this interview with us. She has a 10-week-old. She's still on mat leave. She just wants to be in the right time, right place, and is taking advantage of those opportunities to really help solve a very intransigent, life disrupting problem. So really excited to hear more from her.
Welcome to the Business of the V. Hello, friends and colleagues. I'm Dr. Alyssa Dweck.
And I'm Rachel Braun Scherl. Each week, we bring you the most fascinating investors, inventors, entrepreneurs, academics, and healthcare practitioners who are making things happen in women's sexual and reproductive health.
If you are a woman, know a woman, have a business, or care about your V health and wellness, fasten your seatbelts and listen in to another informative and inspiring episode.
So we are so excited to have our guest today, Lauren Barker, who's the CEO of Uresta. And we're going to give you the chance to say how you got here and what Uresta is, but we're delighted to have you.
I'm super excited to be here. So thank you for inviting me today.
Our pleasure. So start with, how'd you get here? People don't wake up or dream all day, all their lives that they're going to open an incontinence business. So tell us how you got here. Was there a personal moment or a catalyst that said, this is something I need to solve?
Sure. Yeah, I will give you a little bit of background. So I started my career more on the finance side. So I started my career in investment banking and private equity. As you can imagine, there wasn't a lot of women. So I was working in finance when I was connected with the inventor of Uresta, who is a urogynecologist. His name's Dr. Farrell. And he had invented the product, sort of gotten it through like initial clinical studies and regulatory approvals, but he was really looking to build a business around it, which often requires capital. And
Let me
I
ask you a question though,
yeah,
because it's very unusual,
yeah,
to be an investment banker and have someone come with an incontinence device.
yeah.
Was it a work setting? Was it a social setting? How did you start having a
Yeah,
conversation?
it's actually a great question. Was sort of my third business partner who I very good friends with. He was a colleague. We were very close. He knew the physician. And so he had been connected with him, and he had asked me, as one of really the only females that he really knew in finance, if I could take a look at the business and maybe help him out if I could, and just like to get my perspective. And that's really how it all came to be. It was probably around like 2019. I met Dr. Farrell. I learned about the product. I was blown away that this condition impacted, 1 in 3 women after the age of 30, and then as many as 1 in 2 by time of menopause. And then I was just blown away at like the common solutions. Like 80% of women were or are using disposable pads. And the more research I did, and I just started helping him for free. Like this was like side of the desk, like full passion project.
Well,
The more
I'm still laughing at you're the one woman he knew in finance.
Well, it was a colleague that I was very close with that knew the physician. It kind of just it was just, you know,
Yeah,
late nights in the
serendipity.
office. We went one time, you know, we'd always get dinner together and it just came up in conversation. It's just one of those things like right time, right place, right? And anyways, I was just really intrigued by it. And I feel like, you know, the menstrual space has seen a ton of innovation with like menstrual cups. And I like love my menstrual cup. I'm like one of those people that like scream it from the rooftop. And I was like, you're telling me that like I could have a baby and experience bladder leaks pretty much daily and have to use pads. Like it just felt like you're going back in time. And then the more like I started doing customer interviews, I started just talking to women in my life, and it was pretty
And you're
obvious.
still
Like
working full time in banking at this point.
I was still working full time. Yeah, and I did for about 2 years. Like this was really just like kind of side of the desk collaboration sort of thing. And you know, when you like start joking, like, oh, you should just join us, you should like quit your job. And then after 2 years, you're like, should I? Right.
That's
And
very
so,
brave, very brave.
yeah. And I felt like it was kind of right time, right place again with when like COVID had just happened. You know, we were working from home a lot. I was starting to think about like where I wanted to be like long term. You know, I'm sure we'll get into this, but like I just had my first baby a couple months ago, but I was like starting to think about like, you know, when do I want to have kids and what sort of lifestyle do I want to have and where do I want to live? Because I was at the time like living in Toronto. I was living away from my family and my husband's family. So there was like a lot of things at play. And it was just kind of like, you know what? Let's take a run at it. Let's give it a year. And worst case scenario, I'll just go back to my old job. And
This is great.
it's been almost 5 years. So
Yeah, I
didn't
think
have to
that
go back.
this is extremely helpful for so many women listening who
Yeah.
may want to make big career changes, and it can
Yeah.
be quite scary. My question
Yeah.
is this. It looks like this device has really been in the works for maybe 15, 20 years.
Yes,
I
that's
would
correct.
love
Yeah.
to understand what has transpired over so much time,
Right.
especially in a space that is still considered quite taboo,
Yeah.
and is running a little bit behind menopause, sexual health, period
Mhm.
health, which
Yeah,
has really broken through that taboo barrier. So, talk
totally.
a little about that.
Yeah, so it has been in the works for a while. And that's really because Dr. Farrell, so he was a full-time urogynecologist. This might be crazy to hear, but he was actually the third ever urogynecologist in Canada.
Oh, wow.
So, and I'm sure in the US it's similar, and I've talked to other urogynecologists, like it's almost like a newer specialty. But he had so he's a third ever. He was like one of the first to start using pessaries to treat stress incontinence. Pessaries, for those who don't
I'd
know,
like
it's
I'd like to just back up for a moment.
yeah,
Stress incontinence, for those who
yeah,
might not be familiar with the formal
yes,
definition, implies an involuntary leakage of urine with physical activity like straining, like coughing, like sneezing, like
yes,
exercise. It affects probably a third of the female population, and risk factors for this would include having kids, having weight challenges, specifically being overweight. There are some genetic propensities towards stress incontinence. And some people even feel that chronic coughing or chronic heavy lifting may be risk factors as well.
yeah.
So please
Yeah,
continue.
yeah, yeah, for sure, for sure. And so he was sort of one of the first to treat stress incontinence with pessaries. We can get into what pessaries are, but
Yeah, why don't
at
you
a,
define that also? Because sometimes
yeah,
we're just
Yeah,
off to the
I'll
races.
take that.
I
So,
feel, yeah,
there are so many different types of pessaries. A pessary is essentially a device that is placed in the vagina in an effort to provide further support so that the bladder and urethra do not have too much pressure on them with those physical strains. Pessaries have notoriously been pretty difficult to insert. They cause some side effects, including vaginal discharge. They also can increase the risk of urinary tract infection in some cases. And to be quite frank, women really don't care for pessaries because especially the younger women who are dealing with stress incontinence, because it precludes sexual activity without removing it and replacing it. The older generation, particularly those who are not sexually active, actually like pessaries, but I know we can get further into that.
There's so much to comment on there. Definitely want to come back to that. I always like to say we're trying to make like pessaries cool. And
Yeah.
it's not your grandma's pessary, but we can get into that. So anyways, so he was one of the first to start using pessaries to address stress incontinence. He had written textbooks. He had started to sort of doodle on the side of his desk of what, a over-the-counter self-managed pessary could look like, one that didn't require a prescription, one that didn't require a physician fitting. And so it took some time to really get it to market because he was working on prototypes. He had even, we laugh about this now, but he had even drew up a pessary and sent it as a very naive doctor to like one of the main pessary manufacturers in the US. And 3 years later, it was in market and he never heard from them again. So he knew when he had his next idea for a pessary, he was going to keep it to himself. So he even was trialing his pessary designs with patients in his clinic. And then he went through initial clinical studies to get his regulatory approval with Health Canada and then the FDA. And then he, at the time, was really working, full time. He had put a ton of personal capital into Uresta and just didn't really know how to take it to the next, step to really commercialize it, to really grow awareness. And so I think him and his wife sort of tinkered on it for a while. And then that's when I met him, close to a decade later. And he was really looking for that partner, for that person to really take it to the next level and really work on the awareness piece. One other big thing that has materialized in the last year has been that we used to be only cleared as a prescription product in the US. So we had a multi-year process to work with the FDA to actually remove the prescription requirement. So as of November 2024, so less than a year ago, we've been able to actually sell Uresta directly to women without a prescription. And that is ultimately was the vision for Uresta, was to have it, we do rely on, physicians, a lot of pelvic floor physiotherapists to recommend the product. But the vision was for this to be something that was highly accessible and self-managed by women themselves. And that was to be over the counter.
Show the Uresta because for those watching on YouTube, which we hope people will subscribe, it's a small device. It comes in a couple of sizes because I guess it needs to be fitted appropriately for different people. My curiosity, and this is a lot less threatening than many of the pessaries we currently use for patients. But can you talk a little about the insertion process and also the material? Because I could see some people still feeling a little intimidated when they get a box and say, what am I supposed to do with this? And how does this possibly work?
Yes, that is such a good comment to bring up. Some of the pessaries that you might see in your doctor's office are very intimidating. I know from talking to women, and I think just based on judgment, you're probably showing the largest size in the starter.
Yes, I am, just because I'm, on a camera. I figured it's
For
so
sure.
there are three sizes that come in the box.
Yeah.
1, 2, 3. It's like small, medium, large, and I suppose there are other sizes that are available if somebody has a unique need. But I'm just curious about the material, the insertion process, the learning curve,
For sure.
and the like, because certainly there are other products that have frankly not done very well that are user initiated from over the counter. So what makes this one so special?
Yeah. So in terms of the material, it's made of the highest quality medical grade resin that can be used in the body for a long-term period. That was actually a really big part of our FDA clearance.
Great. So no latex. No latex, which is always a question. It's not silicone. So a lubricant that is silicone could potentially be used with it. Okay.
Yeah, we recommend a water-based lubricant with the product if that's something you want to use. But yeah, hypoallergenic, can be left in the body for long periods of time. It's non-absorbent, which is really important because it doesn't carry that, toxic shock risk that you hear about with tampons. So that is the material in itself. We do recommend, just quickly on use, you can use it for a full 24-hour period, but we do recommend taking it out daily, washing it with just soap and water, and taking a little bit of a breather. Because stress incontinence is activity driven, not to say we don't have women who actually just use it at nighttime, but usually women take it out at night. But this, so you just showed the product, but I'll explain sort of the insertion. So it's got this tapered tip. So that really helps with when you're inserting Uresta into the vagina. The bell shape here is what is doing all the work. So that is what is supporting your urethra. And then this handle here is just helping with insertion and removal. So when you are using Uresta, this product should be fully inserted into the vagina. This little handle should not be hanging out. It should be actually about probably 2 centimeters, could be even a little bit further into the vagina. So that is how kind of insertion works. For sure, get a lot of comments from women like, wow, that looks like it's going to be really uncomfortable. I've even had urogynecologists who have received the starter kit that want to try it themselves before they recommend it to their patients. And I have even heard from them, wow, like I thought it was going to be uncomfortable, but once it was in place, I really didn't feel it. And, if you think of a menstrual cup or you think of a tampon, like once you've sort of inserted it, you shouldn't feel it at all. If you are feeling like it is uncomfortable, you're probably wanting to try a size smaller. And so
the biggest question that
yeah,
I get in my office and concern, and actually this has certainly occurred, is people who use the typical pessaries and they go
yeah,
to strain to have a bowel movement and bam, their pessary lands in the toilet. And
right.
God forbid it's in a public toilet because then it's kind of gone forever. So
Mhm.
is there any issue with that? That's a question I would anticipate.
A little bit, like I think it really just depends on the user and like their experience. Like we have some women who prefer to take it out prior to a bowel movement. Some women, a lot of people go to the washroom, have their bowel movement first thing in the morning, so they might wait to insert it for the day until they've had their bowel movement.
Yeah.
Some women find maybe it starts to come out a little bit and they need to push it back into place after they've had their bowel movement, or some are unaffected by it.
Have you
So
guys
it really
done
depends.
are there clinical trials on the product that are,
Yes,
research based and
absolutely. Yeah.
yeah.
So we've been through 4 clinical studies. Our most recent one I like to highlight because it followed a group of active women who used the product for a year. And these were women that were, average age was 42, healthy BMIs, they were runners, they were CrossFit participants, they were lifting heavy weight. So these were women that were really experiencing a lot of stress incontinence, especially when they worked out. In that study, 97% of women saw a reduction in their leaks when using Uresta, and 90% of them continued to use Uresta after 12 months. And I think that is so important to highlight because,
Yeah.
as you were saying, Dr. Dweck, like a lot of women have a hard time removing it. Or, as you were saying, it's a lot of older women that might be using it versus, women in their 30s and 40s. I've talked to women in their 30s and 40s, and they're like, my grandma has a pessary. Like, I don't want a pessary. And
Yeah.
so, it followed a group of active young women. And I think it just goes to show you like how easy it is to insert and remove, that they were able to continue, 90% of them continued to use it after a year. And I know
Well,
other
that's great to
studies,
hear
yeah,
because the preclusion of intercourse or sexual activity with
yes,
this inserted is a big deal. So as long as it's
totally.
easy to take in and out, are
Yeah.
there any concerns about UTIs with this device or concerns about, pressure sores or any other adverse events? And I specifically ask because of the menopause population
Yeah.
where the
Yeah.
vagina gets so, much less elastic and more delicate.
For sure. I mean, when it comes to UTIs, so again, in the 4 clinical studies, there's been no adverse effects. There's been no suggestion that this increases the risk of UTIs or other infections. The biggest thing is just making sure you are washing your hands well before and after inserting Uresta, right? So just making sure you're not introducing bacteria. That would be like probably the biggest risk point in terms of causing a UTI, nothing from the device itself, just introducing
Sure.
bacteria. So making sure you're washing your hands and washing the device when you take it out and prior to insertion.
So here's today's hot flash. Did you know that there's a term called bathroom mapping specifically for people who suffer with incontinence or the fear of incontinence? Why do people engage in bathroom mapping? Well, fear of accidents in public, uncertainty about restroom availability, and impact on quality of life. In fact, there's an app for that.
So if someone's
Yeah,
been listening for the last few minutes, they
yeah,
might, think they walked into a medical conference. And
fair enough.
the part that I'm
Yeah,
fascinated by is, sitting minding your business,
yeah,
doing investment banking. So many stories we hear
mm,
from the founders that we speak to had a personal issue and created a business. You saw a business and then saw that it had personal application, which is really exciting. So
yeah,
where are you now? You've done 4 clinical
yeah,
studies. You seem very excited. Obviously, you are an established CEO at this point. Where do people get the product? How is
yeah,
the product doing? All the
yeah,
how did you finance it? All the things that say, wow, it's 2025 and 6 years later, we still exist, which is not something that every
totally.
women's health startup company can say.
Yeah. So, when I originally partnered with Dr. Farrell, it was like the beginning of COVID. We originally started in Canada. So we launched in Canada as a direct to consumer product. Pretty much 90% of our revenue coming through our own website. We do have some clinics that carry the product. That hasn't changed today. We are mostly through our website. We work on educating pelvic floor physios, and we have family doctors, we have OBGYNs, we have urogynecologists
And
that
do you
we
have
are
affiliate
educating.
programs? So if doctors recommend it, that they get a revenue share?
Yes, that's available if that's something that they are interested in. Some purchase the product and just carry it in their clinics.
Mhm.
It really depends on what works for them.
Mhm.
But we have a like a page on our website for healthcare providers. Like if you're a healthcare provider working today or listening today and you want to offer this to your patients, there's a contact form on our website. We will send you a sample, our medical studies, marketing materials, and then we have a training video as well. So we kind of direct to consumer, but definitely rely on those healthcare
With the
providers
professional
from, yeah,
validation.
as a referral channel. And then, yeah, we initially launched in Canada because that's where we're based, and had initial clearance with Health Canada. And then once we started to see the momentum here in Canada, we knew we needed to be in the US. That's when we started our process with the FDA to become an over-the-counter product. As I said earlier, we originally were available in the US, but required a prescription. We wanted to remove that barrier. We worked on that for almost 3 years. We got our approval in late 2024, and then we launched in the US in November 2024, and it's gone very, very well for us. Still so much to do. We, have some other products in the pipeline that we're focusing on. We're very much focused right now on stress incontinence, but we're looking as well at some options for prolapse management. And so,
Yeah.
yeah, we're really excited. I think it's, an industry that is really, really ripe for innovation. And, as someone who like just had a baby, like and I have a lot of friends that are having babies and I'm talking to them about their
You are your own
experiences.
focus group right now.
I am my own focus group. Yeah. And I love talking to women. It's like my favorite part of the job. And, doing customer research. So yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, we're still very much a
Curious.
startup, but yeah,
Yeah, for
lots of
sure.
potential.
But it's super exciting, especially since, as I mentioned, it's still such a taboo topic. How how do you plan to break that barrier that,
Mhm.
where to allow people to comfortably speak about urinary incontinence? It's
Yeah,
a tough one.
totally. So we've a couple things. I mean, I think I've said this already on the call, but it's like right time, right place. I think, and to your earlier comment about Uresta sort of being in the works for over a decade, social media has really changed the conversation, I think, for so many different women's health issues. But pelvic floor physiotherapists are, they've been around for a while. They're not like in Europe, for example, if
Yeah.
you have a baby, you're automatically referred to, or not everywhere in Europe, but in the UK and France, you're referred to a pelvic floor physio. In Canada and the US, that is like a very much a growing discipline of physiotherapy.
Yeah.
And during COVID, a lot of them weren't working, and they were going on social media and they were starting to have like these conversations about incontinence and prolapse and pelvic health and all of that. And so I think it really that started some of the discussion. So as a company, to really break down those stigmas, like we've really focused on, I mean, education is huge. I think a lot of women, have heard of bladder leaks. Like they've heard of, I sneeze when I pee, I laugh so hard I peed my pants, but they don't understand why and what's happening.
Right.
And until you understand what's happening in your body, you won't understand how Uresta works. So like really, I like educating what causes stress incontinence, how something inserted into your vagina is going to stop your bladder leaks, but you can still pee with it in, is a huge thing we've had to tackle. And then I think just sharing real women's stories. Like some of our best content on social media has been our customers just talking into their iPhone, sending us a video and telling us their story with bladder leakage. Some that have dealt with it for 20 years, some that have even had surgery for it and it hasn't been successful. And I think like they tell their story and then someone buys the product because they're like, their story is my story. They resonated so much with me. And then I think also just breaking down stigmas. I think there's a big stigma, like we've already talked about on this call a little bit, but that it's a mom issue. Like it's not just for women that have had babies. It's something that can happen at time of menopause. There's also, the amount of times women have messaged me and said, my doctor just told me to lose weight and that it would go away. A lot of shaming around it being a weight issue. So I love to show, the young 38-year-old who's super fit, who's like, I use this product every time I work out, and really break down that stigma and shame, right? So yeah.
And one of the
Sure.
interesting things from a business perspective is it sounds very much like what we call the torture test. Like if this deodorant works for a firefighter, it'll definitely work for me. If this
Right.
if this device works for a marathoner, when I'm picking my kids up at daycare,
Yeah.
and I pick them up, that should be fine.
Right.
One of the things that we see over and over again, and Uresta
Mhm.
has jumped in to do this also, is in the gap of education, either because
Yeah.
it's not done properly in schools or the parents aren't properly educated to do it. We see so many companies who are stepping in and filling that gap.
Right.
So there are a lot of companies at this point who are touching on some part of incontinence. And
Yeah.
we always speak to founders and they say, the more the better in women's health. You can't be
Right.
the only one shouting into the wind about incontinence. What's your perspective? If people see yours and they see some competitors, and I'm not asking you to give
Yeah.
free
Yeah.
airtime to the competitors, but what should they know that's different? Now, clearly it's different than
Mhm.
pads. And one of the
Yeah.
things that we've seen in the development of the conversation around incontinence is we used to just talk about how many pads did you use, how many leaks did you have? Now,
Right.
as women are starting these businesses, we say, what other aspects of your life does it affect? How
Right.
does it affect your intimacy? How does it affect your confidence when you leave the house not being sure if you're going to leak? And I've used this example before, but the one
Mhm.
that really brought it home to me is I remember we were speaking to a customer and she said, I cry when I pick up my grandchild because I leak. Like we are now, because of companies like you, having
Yes.
conversations about how this really impacts. This is not just
Oh,
about
it's
urine leakage. It's about confidence. It's about comfort. It's about feeling
Quality of life,
quality of
full on
life.
quality of life.
huge.
I also want to
Huge.
mention something that is unique, which obviously you would bring up, Lauren, is odor. So pads and, special undergarments that are either absorbent or repellent of urine. A lot of people do complain about urine odor. But
Mhm.
in the case of a device such as this, the urine leakage is being prevented in the first place. So odor would be
Yeah.
less of an issue, which I think is huge. That's really what I see in my practice quite a
Yeah.
bit.
Yeah. No, that is, it is probably one of the biggest issues that women tell us afterwards. Like, oh, I'm like freed from the odor. I'm free from the dampness. Rachel, you're so right. Like, this is such a huge quality of life issue. I've been at this for 5 years and I still hear stories that amaze me about how women change their entire lives around their bladder leakage. I talked to a woman who said she bought her house because of the proximity of the washroom to the bed. Like I've talked to a real estate agent who's like, you can't, it's a faux pas to use the washrooms in the houses you're showing. So she will rearrange her day around
Wow.
access to public washrooms. And then I think we all know how dirty some public washrooms can be. So then it's like, where's the best washrooms to use on my route today,
Yeah.
right? Women who
And
are
this is a thing, just so people are listening, this
Bathroom
idea of
mapping.
bathroom mapping is a
Yeah,
thing.
it is.
yeah, we've joked about, creating like washroom guides. Because that is how prevalent people who aren't going on vacations because they're like, I don't know what it's going to be like when I get there and my access to the washrooms. People like this one woman was saying, I was fighting my grandkid for the washroom one day and I was so embarrassed. And then I felt like my kids weren't going to trust me watching my grandkid because I couldn't even, hold my bladder.
I mean, this
Right?
stuff goes really,
Oh,
really deep.
I could go. I've had women tell me they were on a business trip and they were with their boss and they were running to catch a connecting flight. They peed their pants. They sat for 3 hours next to their boss on the plane and was so paranoid that they smelt. And
What I love
odor
about
is
this is
huge.
once you open the conversation, we talk about this with founders and
Totally.
investors all the time. The stuff that keeps you going in the hard times is you're
Oh,
really changing people's
100%.
lives in ways that you might not be aware of until you're in it. Like these stories could
Totally.
make you cry. Now,
Oh,
I'm not a
they have.
person who suffers from incontinence, but I can't stand being trapped. I have to be in an aisle on a
Right.
plane. I have to be in an aisle in a movie. I
Yeah.
just don't. So magnify that times
You're
a
right.
million times, being in
Totally.
professional settings. So just,
And every day, like
yes.
it's something that impacts women every single day.
So we
And
could
it's
be
fun.
talking about this forever, but I just want
We
to give
could.
you a chance to talk about a couple of
Yeah.
quick things. How have you funded this business?
Yeah, so a mix of debt and equity. So we have a number of high net worth individuals that have supported us on our journey. We also, so the Bank Development of Canada gave us a very sizable equity and loan sort of instrument. And so, yeah, that's how we've been funded to date. We will probably be back out there raising again at some point. It's a huge market, right? Like like you said, it's 1 in 3 women. So there's a lot of opportunity and a lot of education and awareness that we need to do to keep spreading the word about Uresta.
Is
That requires
Uresta
capital.
made, is it made in the US or made in Canada,
It
or
is
do you have to rely on other?
it's made in Canada. So we have a absolutely fantastic medical manufacturer that's just based outside of Toronto. So
Right.
that is where we are currently manufactured.
Fantastic.
Yeah,
As Rachel said, we could go on forever and
we
ever.
could.
I'm sure you have other things coming, to fruition, or that you're thinking about in your pipeline, whether it's improvements in this particular product or other products. Um, Care to share any of that, or are you
Yeah.
under lock and key?
I can give you some high level stuff. Well, first off, we are working on 2 complementary products that we're hoping to launch hopefully in the next few months. One is a cleanser for the product, and one is a lubricant to help with insertion. That's all natural. We're also working on a vaginal moisturizer product that would be non-hormonal. We want to go through a clinical study on that to show the improvement to vaginal dryness. Like you had mentioned earlier, a lot of women in menopause have some irritation with this type of product. So we're hoping that product will help address some of that.
So,
And then we are working on, so Uresta today has really been only tested for stress urinary incontinence. We have a number of women who have used the product to manage their pelvic organ prolapse, but we
yeah.
have not had a chance to do a clinical study on that. But based on so much feedback from women, that's actually an area that we're going to be digging into further and trying to do more studies around the Uresta product and how it can better be used to manage prolapse
Sure.
symptoms. Yeah.
And just for people who aren't familiar with that, prolapse is essentially a relaxation of the organs where they relax into and sometimes extrude from the vagina. And of course, prolapse and urinary leakage can go hand in hand. So
Yeah.
Super cool. Well, it has been such a pleasure, and your excitement is literally contagious. So thank you for sharing your story and really speaking about Uresta. It's super interesting.
And we wish you continued success. I mean, same with Alyssa. I feel like I just want to smile because your
Yeah.
enthusiasm, your passion, your connection to the people that you're helping are all really inspiring. So we will continue to watch you and cheer you on from the sidelines and look forward to what's coming next from Uresta. Thanks so much for joining us.
Well, thank you for having me.
Don't forget, subscribe to our podcast at businessofthev.com for the latest trends and trendsetters in women's health and business.